Okay, we're talking about more complicated graphs and maybe some shifts and periods and things like that. Let's talk about secant 1/2 x. Okay? My period is 1/2, and I know the period for sine, cosine, secant, cosecant is 2 pi. So again, 2 pi over b is my period. Well, b is 1/2. So that ends up being 1/2. The 2 comes up. 2 over 1/2 equals 4 pi. Alright? So I'm going to go back to something a lot of people didn't seem to get this, but normally I know what? I know cosine on the unit circle starts out at 1, halfway through hits -1, and halfway through the first half hits 0. It hits -1, and then the second half hits 0 back to 1. So instead of going 0 to 2 pi, it's going to take us 4 pi to do our secant, but also cosine. Okay, and I don't know if I was talking in circles here, but remember, secant is 1 over cosine of theta or x. Okay. So instead of taking 2 pi, it's going to take us 4 pi. And remember, secant's based off cosine. So what I'm going to do is, I know, like I said, we start out at 1 and finish at 1. But now my bookends are at 0 and 4 pi, because my period of secant 1/2 is 4 pi. Right? Like I said, the middle of, I'm going to draw the cosine graph first, get my asymptotes, and then draw my smile and frown. The middle of my graph is at 2 pi, because I go from 0 to 4 pi. The middle of a cosine graph is -1. Okay, here's my -1, here's 1. And like I said, the middle of each half is at 0. The middle of this half is at 0. So here's my cosine graph for a period, or b, of 1/2. Alright? Notice, so I do half of that peak in pi, so this would come down here if I finish that off and continue down. Every pi we're going to go like so. So I find out where my 0 now in this new graph. That's where my asymptotes are going to go. At 3 pi, at pi, at -pi. Okay? Alright? So here is my smile, and here is my frown. Okay? And here's a smile, and so on. Okay? So there's my period from -pi to 3 pi. That's my, notice what my interval is now. My interval for me to graph secant 1/2 x, I went from -pi to 3 pi, which is 4 pi, like we talked about. But that's what it took to graph a complete smile and a complete frown. And here I'd start over again and repeat the cycle, okay? Now, if I had to add, if I threw in, like, say, a +1, all these points would shift up +1, like secant 1/x +1. If I wanted to change things, like we'll talk more about what I could do, put this in black. You know, a -2 would do what? All these the points that aren't 0 would flip and double, and then you would have this smile would be a frown, and so on. If you have a -a, your smile will flip and become a frown. And and like I said, this will affect your range. Okay? Like on this graph here, if this was -2, this point here would flip down from 1 to be -2, and now I'd have a frown. And now my range is affected because I'm -infinity to -2, and no longer up to -1. So there's a lot of things we can do. If I put in a parentheses, I'm just going to clear this off. All right, let's say I have parentheses, x plus or minus pi halves or whatever, then everything's going to shift. Half a pi. The asymptotes, everything moves. Okay? It could probably get pretty messy, but remember what I did here. I established my period. Before I graph secant, I realized that my cosine would be 4 pi, and I know I start at 1, end at 1. There's 4 pi. The middle is -1. The middle of each half is 0. Drew asymptotes. I completed the graph. And then I did my smile and frown. Okay? That's a short glimpse of maybe doing some different things tomorrow. Okay? All right. That's a good short video. What is it? Oh, new record, 5:20. I rock.